Activate your energy.
Welcome to the Activated Authors Podcast, a show where we distill the core principles of what it takes to become a happy, healthy, and productive author, no matter what stage of the journey you're at. I'm your host, Daniel Wilcox. I'm an international best-selling author, as well as an author coach, speaker, and creative entrepreneur. But most importantly, I'm a lifelong student of all things productivity, psychology, and human behavior. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Without further ado, let's dive in. What is up, Activators? Welcome to another episode of the Activated Authors Podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by the incomparable Helen Scheuerer. Helen is the YA fantasy author of the best-selling series The Oremere Chronicles and The Curse of the Cyren Queen. Her work has been highly praised for its strong, flawed female characters and its action-packed plots. Helen holds a Bachelor of Creative Writing and a Master's of Publishing. Now a full-time author, Helen lives amidst the mountains in Central Otago, New Zealand, and is constantly dreaming up new stories. Helen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you to sit down and actually go into some formal conversation about your stuff, because we've spoken a fair bit offline about your journey and the things that you're doing over the last year. And you are involved in quite a lot, and I think there's going to be quite a lot to dig into. But one place I want to start is, we briefly touched on just before we started talking. What is it that made you pursue your Bachelor of Creative Arts? Because I've got a real thing in my head where I really want one, but I'm already writing. And so I'm wondering what kind of value that brings and the reason that you pursued that in the first place.
It's a really interesting conversation about university degrees and the creative arts, but it's a pretty simple answer for me. There was just nothing else I wanted to do at uni. And I knew I wanted to go to uni, but it had to be for something that I was passionate about, that I was interested in. I couldn't really see myself, studying for 3 years, anything else. It's a commitment, and also not to mention the financial commitment of it as well. I had several arguments with my parents over that, actually, when I must have been about 18, 17 at the time. I just decided that I wanted to do that. And couldn't imagine doing anything else. And it was really valuable in that, we studied a lot of incredible literature. It did sort of open your eyes to having to write to a routine and submit to deadline and things like that. I guess what I've kind of realized in hindsight is that it was quite limiting in terms of the genre that we studied, which was no genres. It was just classics, and it was just literary fiction. And it was very much, as you can imagine, it was just very much traditional based publishing talk. There was no mention of indie publishing. And also throughout the 3 years of studying, we were just told, oh, you can never make a living as a writer. But here, study 3 years about how to be a writer.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it was, I don't regret doing it, but sort of like you said, you're already writing. And I think any sort of incredibly valuable experience that I'm using now, I gained through doing and learning myself and educating myself. And, you do a lot of that. And I kind of struggle to think back to how the university would have been able to offer the same sort of learning experiences that we create for ourselves as indies, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. And that's really interesting as well, because obviously it's very specifically a Bachelor of Creative Writing. I did bachelor's sort of joint honours in English and drama. And although when I went to university, it was because I wanted to become an English teacher. I don't know why. It's because I had a really good English teacher that basically inspired me and brought me into actually enjoying the process of writing. But I studied for 3 years, and I can't really tell you anything that we wrote. There wasn't, unless you were on the full course, there was only one creative writing elective module. And I often say to people, because people are like, oh, you write because, you've got a degree in English. And I go, well, no, because we studied Georgian literature, psychoanalytic, Freudian theory and sort of critical analysis and things. And there was very, very little in the way of what I use now to actually write books, because it's all very all very historical literature. And I find that very, very interesting that in the creative writing bachelor that they don't give you some more of that contemporary stuff, more of the, I think it sounds good that they taught you, the actual practice of writing. How did that look within the course itself, and then what elements of that have you lifted to bring into your process at the minute?
How did it look at the time? I mean, I guess the subjects were split up into prose, poetry, screenwriting, and you had to do a core unit of each of those and then sort of specialize in one alongside doing, I mean, I can't remember the name of it, but like classic literature or, you know, sort of an essay-based, research-based subject as well. And then you could minor in something like editing or philosophy or, you know. But yeah, it would involve, you know, getting an assignment, writing a short story, bringing it into workshop. I suppose that's really, now that I'm talking, getting more into it, the workshopping aspects of the degree was probably the biggest takeaway from it. Learning how to take criticism, learning how to give criticism, you know, being able to bounce around ideas with other writers, and I guess also learn who to listen to and who not to listen to, I think is quite valuable.
That's huge.
So, yeah, so that's probably more so than any sort of style I took away or any sort of, I don't know, how to write a book lessons, because we certainly didn't even dive into a longer form work of any kind, but definitely taking away how to take criticism, how to give it, because you need that in, like, no matter what path you go down, whether it's trad or indie, you're going to get criticized at some point, no matter how good you are. So yeah, I'd say that's probably the biggest takeaway from it.
Oh, I love that. There's so much in that, especially listening to the right people. One thing that I come up against a lot is I do get asked my advice a lot on sort of book covers for different genres. And as a horror writer and, you know, someone who's done some nonfiction as well, when people send me or like ask me directly to judge like a fantasy cover or like a mystery thriller cover or like a just any different genre, like a romance, like I can tell when a cover looks pretty, and I can tell sort of like the main, because I have a little bit of a background in design, but like I can tell sort of the basis of it. But I always say to the people, like, I'm not from your genre, so you will probably know better. Like, take what I say with a pinch of salt. Listening to the right person is just so vital, just across all parts of especially self-publishing, but I think just creative writing in general. And then you went on to do your Masters of Publishing. What does that look like?
God, what did it look like? So basically, I guess it was, and this was very much traditionally focused. There was, again, no talk of indie publishing. Something I would love to do is potentially go to a uni and do like guest lectures on the subject, because it's just so, it's just not even spoken about. It's not even an option in either the creative writing degree or the Masters of Publishing. But what Masters of Publishing did was that it gave me a really in-depth overview of the entire like publishing system. So within a publishing house, or whether you're dealing with literary agencies, and the part that I found the most fascinating was the book production process, which as an indie, like, you're part of it from the beginning to the end. So that was really valuable to me. And yeah, just, you know, the different departments in a publishing house, which also as an indie, you are all those departments. So I got a lot out of the publishing masters, just in terms of sort of practical knowledge and having the awareness that I could actually take on board all of these things and have a really thorough, in-depth understanding of the different stages of production, of the editorial stages. And yeah, I mean, we did subjects like magazine design as well. So it was all different sorts of publishing, but yeah, we did that. We did editing. So I think more so than the creative writing degree, the Masters of Publishing really sort of gave me a leg up in terms of understanding, you know, the broader machine that is publishing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's a hell of a rounded way to get involved in this process, because I think a lot of people come to independent publishing by having written a story and then going, I'll figure out the rest later. But obviously you seem to have gone through the formal education route, managed to get this entire comprehensive look at what the publishing process looks like. Were you writing at this point? When was it that you started sort of, you know, penning your first stories, and were you using that knowledge as you were learning it, or was this sort of later?
It's all kind of a bit of a mishmash, really, because when I did my creative writing degree. Like I was 18, 19 when I started that. And one thing I will say about that is it very much geared its students towards being literary and being, you know, serious fiction. And I, being very impressionable at the time, you know, decided, well, if I'm going to be taken seriously, I have to write literary fiction. So I wrote a literary fiction manuscript while I was at my first degree. I worked on it for years. I got a publishing contract with a small press in Melbourne and worked with the publisher for, it must have been like 2 years. And while I was doing my master's, I think, I was having a really hard time with this particular publisher. Not like they were nasty or anything, but I think my gut was telling me it was going nowhere, and that they were trying to start changing my voice in the editing stages, and it was just, it begun to feel like sort of pulling teeth. And sort of in order to escape that, I started writing young adult fantasy just for fun. And I did NaNoWriMo in, must have been 2016. And so while I was doing these degrees, I was kind of going through all of that. And then the sort of like the best thing that could have happened, where the publisher reverted the rights back to me of that original literary fiction book. And like that was not the book I was meant to write. I was trying to fit to a certain mold that I'd been told was the, you know, the acceptable thing. And really, when I started writing the fantasy, I was like, why haven't I been doing this the whole time? Like it sounds like so stupid now. Like, of course, why wasn't I writing what I love reading? But, you know, you sort of just get molded in a certain way. But yeah, once I started that fantasy, I knew pretty much then that I was going to independently publish that, just because the experience with the trad publisher had just been so unnecessarily long-winded and inefficient and frustrating. And yeah, then I think because I'd done the masters, I'd run a website for writers in the past, and I'd published some creative writing anthologies. So I'd done book production on a practical level as well already. And I felt pretty confident that I could put together a professional product. And yeah, then so it all was kind of happening at the same time. And now I forget the original question.
No, that's perfect. So one thing that you've mentioned a couple of times that like I think is really, really important is, so you mentioned that you'd love to go to like universities and speak on self-publishing. I've given a couple of guest lectures myself at my local university about self-publishing and the fact that it's an option. And I find it, because we're in the bubble of obviously people who know about self-publishing, independent publishing. I think once you get entrenched in this, you get very, you forget that it's not widespread knowledge. And I've gone into classes before of sort of 30, 40 students. And at the beginning, I'll say, like, has anyone here ever considered self-publishing? And you get like 1 or 2 hands. And then by the end of the presentation, where I show like real examples of authors that are doing it, of like ways that you can take control and do it your own way and do the stuff that you love, you get, even then it's weird because you only get like maybe 10, 15 hands, and you'd expect like much more. And I wonder what it is that, you know, really still binds people to the idea of wanting to do the traditional thing. Like because I've tried to figure this out for myself, because I've never really wanted to pursue traditional, because I just like being in control and doing the stuff that I love. And like you say, sometimes traditional can, or most of the time traditional can be a very long-winded process. And it's not to say, like, I'm not bashing traditional here. It obviously has its place and does well. But it really is a mindset shift to go from, okay, let's write in a way that's going to please someone so they can take my book, versus I'm going to write from the stuff that I love, the stuff that I'm passionate about, the stuff that I can sort of do consistently and build upon, and go down the route that is slower building, but it makes me happy. How did you handle that mindset shift? Because like you say, you kind of were brought up with the very literary view, and then you suddenly went, and I know that personally for myself, I went a very, very similar way. And I still find it hard to reconcile with not writing as literary sometimes and writing more fun. And I don't know why that is.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I mean, I don't know what it's like in the UK, but in Oz, and particularly, so I did all my education in Oz, and there the literary scene is quite a bit uppity. And like, I definitely faced the stigmas that we all know about indie publishing, like people assuming that your work isn't as good quality, that you couldn't get a publishing deal, whatever else they say, like I heard it. And the funny thing is that I got, because I'd run this writing website, I had a blog, like I was documenting a lot of this stuff just for me, really. But I had someone from the Big Five reach out about my young adult fantasy book that I was intending on self-publishing. And they said that they'd be interested in reading it, like they requested it. And at this point, I was like 99% sure I was going to indie publish. Like the previous experience had just done my head in. And also I was getting really excited about, the creative control and about the production of the book from start to finish and, all that nerdy stuff that we love. And sort of, I guess, what pushed me over the edge was, like, I had this conversation with this editor, and she said that she really wanted to pass it on to the YA commissioning person. And I was like, okay, like how long do you think it's going to take for you to, read it and then potentially give me your opinion and then potentially give me an offer? And she said something like 4 or 8 weeks. And at this point, I was like nearly ready to publish, and I was just like, nah, I'm good, thank you. And it just confirmed that if I went down that road, like it was the first in a trilogy, if I went down that road, I wasn't only giving up control over that first book, but I would have zero control over when the next book came out and the next book, if they came out at all, because people can publish the first in a trilogy and it doesn't do well, and then they don't publish the rest. So yeah, I think all these things sort of like started to click into place for me and just sort of confirmed that indie was the right way to go for me. And that's not to say that, over the years, part of me hasn't gone, oh, would I go trad? I don't know. But the more and more I see about it, is unless you're a lead title, like you're not going to get the right attention, the right marketing budget, blah, 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 that would make it worth going trad over indie. So I've had all these like little realizations along the way, basically, that have just gone, yep, that was the right decision.
Yeah, because there's a lot of there are a lot of people now who, I'm trying to say this. So one thing that I've observed a lot over the last few years is that the people that seem to be getting a lot of book deals and doing a lot of the good things are people who have already built the audience. So at the minute, publishers of all kinds seem very, very interested in approaching influencers with X thousands of followers. Like I know a lot of YouTubers that have got book deals. I know a lot of sort of Instagram people that have got book deals for the different things they're doing. So it really does seem to be even harder these days if you're an undiscovered author to put that work forward. And then, like you say, each step in the process is just the odds of you actually getting published just lessen and lessen and lessen, because it's, say it's like 5% of getting yourself through the door, and then within that it's like 50% that will carry on through the editing process, and then like going on to publication and everything else. So it does shrink as you go on. When did you first come up against, or when did you first discover indie publishing? And was it through an author? Was it through sort of KDP? How did the actual discovery of indie look for you?
I think I already followed Joanna Penn, just because like I had when I was doing my masters, when I was submitting manuscripts and stuff, I had my pulse on the publishing scene in general, and I was constantly researching publishing and people in publishing, and I think I must have come across Joanna Penn, and this would have been maybe like 2013 or something, and so I followed her from then on, and then I discovered Mark Dawson, and it's very similar route to a lot of people in the industry: Joanna Penn, Mark Dawson, David Cochran. You just sort of work your way through the kind of pioneers, I guess, of the indie scene. So yeah, I was reading Joanna's blog for ages, and then when I kind of decided that I was going to go indie, I invested in Mark Dawson's course, which was pivotal in, your understanding of a lot of the technical side of it as well. So yeah, I did that, and that very much helped set me up for a strong start, I think.
And just to confirm, the first book that you did publish was Heart of Mist.
Yes.
And that did modestly well, am I right?
Yeah, I've since realized that it did quite well.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know what to expect at the time. But yeah, so I published that in August of 2017, and by January 2018 I quit my job, which was only a part-time gig anyway, but thank you. But yeah, I don't think I really understood until really this year just how well that did, and how much of a sort of outlier that was. That's been a tough lesson to learn.
Yeah, well, talk us through that process, because a lot of people, especially self-published, we teach a lot. I know I teach a lot about the long tail, and about like the first book may do some good things, but obviously it's in the next book that builds out, the next book that builds out, and it's kind of that exponential curve up of backlist and product that makes it a sustainable career. What was it like when you put that book out and you were hit with this sort of roaring success? Like you say, you hadn't normalized that as big, or you thought that was relatively normal. But how did you feel at the time when you were able to look at that and go, oh my God, I can do this full time?
To be honest, like, I don't remember having this, crazy moment of like, oh my God, this is happening. I think I'm quite methodical, and like I just took it and was like, okay, now what? I'm very I did the top 5 Clifton Strengths things, and they just sum up everything so well. Like my top one, now I'm not going to remember my top one. Oh no, my top one's focus, and my second one's futuristic. So literally that just sums up my approach to my entire publishing process. Like Heart of Mist did well, but by the time it did well, I was already writing Reign of Mist, the second one, and I was already trying to think of how to make that bigger and better, how to make the next one bigger and better. And so I don't think I ever really took stock of, how well it was doing at the time. And that's why now I look back and I'm like, geez, that actually did really well, and I had no idea. So yeah, I didn't have this sort of big realization until 4 years later.
Which is always helpful to look at that in hindsight.
Yeah.
But I think it is always good to look at where you came from and try and sort of just see the different factors that might have attributed to that success. I mean, was there anything that you can think of specifically around that time that would have helped it boost up the ranks? Because I mean, obviously 2021, as we're talking, it's now December 2021, so nearly 2022. It's a very different publishing landscape to what it was in 2017. So was there anything particular in 2017 that you can kind of correlate that to at all?
I mean, it was just generally easier back then, I think, to get your book in front of people. I couldn't tell you about how crowded the market was or anything like that. It's not something I knew enough about indie publishing back then to have taken any notice about. And I very much back then modeled all my marketing and my launch strategies pretty much on more of a traditional sort of plan. I didn't know much about AMS ads. I didn't know much about the promo sites. That knowledge didn't come until much later. But I did model it off, I think, a launch plan that Mark Dawson gave in his course, which was like a 99-cent launch, followed up by the next week you put the price up, and the next week you put the price up again. And it's
this is self-publishing 101.
Yeah, just the basic one. But yeah, so apart from that, like I did a massive outreach marketing campaign. I reached out to hundreds of book bloggers and reviewers. I was very targeted in my approach. So I would get my comp titles and kind of reverse engineer reviews from them. So like, for example, with Heart of Mist, Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, that's a big comp title for me. And so I'd write in Google Throne of Glass reviews, and then look at the people who were reviewing Throne of Glass, check out their review policy, reach out to them with a professional media kit, with a pitch, blah, blah, blah. And I did that about 400 times. So I think that was a major part of that strategy that, boosted the success. But as I've sort of discovered in the last year or so, the book blogging community isn't nearly as big as it was in 2017. Like half the blogs that I used to approach don't exist anymore. So that and the aggressive pricing strategy, I think, were pretty big contributors to that initial bump.
Yeah, but I absolutely love how in depth you did go with that initial marketing surge. And it does seem that, you know, having a background from studying publishing and the writing and everything else has really given you that sort of critical way to look at market research, making sure that, you know, your book's going to fit in the place that it sits best. You said you were very hot on who your comp titles were, which even people that publish 3 or 4 books at this point, you can argue that they don't quite know who it is they're competing against and where they want to sit in the market. Where does this methodical brain of yours come from? Has it always been like that, like since you were like a little girl, or is it sort of as you've grown up?
Yeah, I've always been like incredibly disciplined, incredibly focused, and to the point where like it's almost irritating, like to me. And in daily life, this stuff frustrates the hell out of me, and, you know, like makes me sound like a bit of an asshole. But, you know, up until I did the Clifton Strengths thing, I didn't really understand, and I thought, like, why doesn't everybody think like this sort of thing? And I couldn't understand why, you know, certain people weren't as disciplined, or they couldn't understand why I wanted to be that disciplined. And it wasn't really until I did the Clifton Strengths, which I've only done top 5. I'm not even fully immersed in it.
So you need.
I was talking to Sasha, and I was joking that because my top strength is focus, it's not allowing me to go and do the rest of them. I'm focused now. I'm focused on my top 5 and everything else I need to do. So I don't want to bother with the 34. But yeah, I don't really know. I don't know where it's come from. But it's kind of nice to know it's like a strength rather than a pain in the ass thing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I'm the same with some of mine. But yeah, so 2017, Heart Mist came out. We're in 2021, and you started a new series.
Curse of the Cyren Queen. Yep.
Yes, and you have 2 books out in that series so far. Am I correct?
Yes.
How have you found the launch in 2021 versus launching in 2017?
Very different. I think like anything that I say about it is just sort of speculation and like gut feeling. But I suspect, so in between War of Mist, which was the 3rd and final book in the Oremere Chronicles, which was the series that did quite well, in between that and the first book in Curse of the Cyren Queen, I published a collection of short stories, which were prequel stories to the Oremere Chronicles, and I published just an ebook omnibus of the Oremere Chronicles. So I stupidly thought that by publishing a collection of short stories and an omnibus, that was my publishing for that year. And it sort of bought me time to write this new series and to develop all this like amazing stuff that I was going to do. And yeah, it just didn't go that way. So Dawn of Mist, which is the collection of short stories, like it was well received by people, but there's flaws in it in that it's a prequel collection. It doesn't go on the series page for Oremere Chronicles, so far less people see it. I had conditioned all these readers to expect these chunky fantasy novels that are like epic proportions, and then I gave them a collection of short stories, which they enjoyed, but like I think they would have preferred, you know, a full-length fantasy novel. And so that year, which I sort of viewed as me buying myself a gap year to put as much effort into this new series as possible, I think that really sort of paused the momentum of, I guess, my career for a little bit. And then I sort of went into publishing A Layer of Bones with the same expectations that I had for Heart of Mist in 2017. And well, not same expectations. I didn't have any when I published it, but afterwards, when it did well,
that's your bar. That's your starting point.
Yeah. I was like, well, that's what publishing publishing a book is. And no, it's not. It's very challenging to get people into a new series, even if they're a fan of your previous work. The book still did well, like A Layer of Bones and the sequel with Dagger and Song. They both were Amazon bestsellers, which is, you know, that's a nice thing to be able to say. But I've definitely found with this new series that it's more the long game than it is, you know, that like, yeah, I couldn't even tell you like sales figures or anything like that off the top of my head, but A Layer of Bones and the sequel, they're gaining momentum now. And A Layer of Bones was published in July. So I've waited however many months for it to really start, chugging along, whereas Heart of Mist was, flying from the get-go. But also my strategy sort of changed a little bit in this series in that I didn't do a 99-cent launch. I launched at full price. What else did I do? I've also, this is the first year that I've published 2 books in 1 year, because the Oremere Chronicles were all 1 book a year. So it'll be interesting to see, because With Dagger and Song only came out about 3.5 weeks ago. So it's still relatively new, and it's only the second in a series of 4. But yeah, I'm really understanding this time around how different it can be publishing a series, and how much more of a long game it is. Very different. It's just super different to what it was for the Oremere Chronicles, which initially I was panicked. It was not what I expected.
Yeah.
My bank account did not look how I expected. But it is sort of on the up now. And I think it's taken a little while to kind of get people to invest in a new series. And one thing I haven't really been overly clear about is that it's actually set in the same world as the Oremere Chronicles, which is part of a much longer term strategy. So maybe I should have been more clear about that, but you don't want to isolate people who haven't read the first series. So, it's all just this massive learning curve, really.
And you can hear that methodical brain going as you're talking, especially when you're looking like the strategy and everything else. I will say for people who haven't checked out A Layer of Bones, it is a fantastic book. I have read it. So congrats on crafting another amazing one.
Thanks.
How have you found, because I know obviously you mentioned that Heart Mist skyrocketed. This one was a bit of a scary launch because it didn't quite start where you wanted to, and it's fantastic to hear that it's growing and it's kind of going in the direction that you want to. How did you find in those first few weeks, as much as you're happy to share, sort of reconciling with that panic of that book? Because this isn't a unique situation. There are lots of authors who have had success, and then they'll bring out a new series and it doesn't quite go where they want it to. How did you approach kind of the next steps in going, right, how do I quote fix this?
Yeah, well, to be brutally honest, after A Layer of Bones came out, I think normally, in a normal circumstance after a launch, I always have a bit of a mental emotional dip. I think we've talked about this
Yes.
on other platforms. You kind of get the post-launch blues a little bit. And so I get that even if a book earns out in the first week, I don't know what's wrong with me. It just happens. But so A Layer of Bones, I had that, which is normal. And then I just sort of had this creeping dread that, fuck, this book isn't doing how it should. Is it even going to earn out what I've put into the cover, into the editing, which is something I never even considered, which shows just how warped my thinking was about how well the other ones had done. But I don't know. I never really considered that I was going to do anything else other than continue the series. Also because I bought myself that gap year. I was quite far into the series already, which is quite scary. So I think when A Layer of Bones came out, book 2 was must have been with beta readers, it was done, and I'd started writing book 3. So what was I going to do? I couldn't really not publish it. And I have to admit, I'm in a position where I've not got any dependents. I haven't got a mortgage at the moment. So I am in a situation that I can afford to take these sort of bigger financial risks, which I can really appreciate not everybody can do. But so that was a decision on my part to just keep pressing forward. Any money I was losing or had lost was, I guess I framed it as an investment in future Helen, regardless of how the, A Layer of Bones and the other books did. They were going to be in a back catalogue eventually, and hopefully, in the future, I would have another series that went gangbusters, and, the rest of the people went back and read them. So yeah, I think it just didn't really seem like there were other options, but also with this, with Curse of the Cyren Queen, I very much have used that series as like an escape from just life. I mean, I was writing it during COVID, you know, any sort of personal stuff and just the mental strain of being an author and having to do this stuff for a living. When I get to write about, you know, a lair made of bones, or like a epic quest across realms and sword fights and magic, like I think that's probably my dream way of escaping anyway. So it's funny that I escaped, you know, worrying about writing by writing, basically.
I love that. But I mean, it's a brutal lesson. That there's a couple of brutal lessons there that, you know, I've learned myself, which is number one, as you say, it is difficult to get people to hop across series, which is bizarre because you're the same writer and you're producing the thing, but you forget that sometimes the readers aren't following you, they're following that story, which is horrible to learn. But then at the same time, the other brutal truth, the fact that like I very much escape from the work that I do with fiction by writing fiction as well. And there's like almost a split in my head of which is which, if that makes sense. So like the creation is very selfish endeavor. It's for me. I'm sat there, I blank everything else out. Whereas when you're publishing and marketing and doing all that kind of stuff, it just feels like a different machine.
Yeah, definitely. I compartmentalize the two different parts. Like, yeah, very much separated, definitely.
Because we've had conversations about your increase in productivity, and as people know, I'm very kind of like keen on trying to find ways to maximize productivity and go down that route. You published 2 books this year. Obviously, you said that part of that you can attribute to having a bit of a longer tail between series, but you are just generally at this minute producing more stuff. What have you done specifically that you can think of that is helping you be more productive and write more and get more books out into the world?
I think, I mean, it's not super technical or anything, but just the sort of mindset shift of I'm a full-time author. My priority each day should be getting the new words down. And before, like, I think it's very easy to fall into the sort of drudgery of answering your emails, doing social media, doing marketing, doing ads. Like that could take over your entire day. And also I've learned I'm a morning person, and I need to write first thing in the morning. If I start with emails and ads and social media, my brain is fried by lunchtime and I don't want to write at the end of the day. Whereas if I start writing at the beginning of the day, I can write all day, or I can answer some emails at lunch or do this, that, and then come back to it. But it's just, I guess for me, learning what has worked and what hasn't worked. And I'm sure you've talked about this a lot on your various podcasts and stuff, but this year I started tracking word count just in a very basic spreadsheet. And, you know, if you look at it, best times are in the morning. And also if I exercise and shower and stuff at a certain time and then go back into it, I come back into it with like a fresh head. And, you know, it's just, I guess, learning what works for you. And yeah, definitely just that very simple mindset shift of like, get the words done. That's your actual job, and anything else can come later. And I think, you know, especially with things like emails and social media, it's never urgent. It is never as urgent as you think it is. It can wait. You can answer it on your lunch break. You can answer it in front of the TV, whereas I can't do those things. Like I can't write when I do those things. So yeah, I think that sort of answers that.
Yeah, I had a colleague whose email system was basically ignore the email unless they send a repeat email asking again and it's urgent. Because
I like that.
Yeah, because then it's like normally people send the email just to get it off of their own heads, to get the ask out. And it's only when they really require the thing that they're like, can you have this now? It's like, yeah, cool. And then you shoot it back and it just saves your own worrying and doesn't clear your inbox, but it's just an easier way of handling it. I would like to get a little bit more granular, if that's okay. Like, so you write in the mornings. What does your typical morning look like? What time do you sort of like get up and get to the keyboard and you know, the specifics of times and things?
Okay, so I'm usually up at 7. I need a tea first thing in the morning, go make a tea. I work to an outline, and there we go. That's what's helped me with the productivity, the outline. Because with Heart of Mist and all the Oremere books, I think I had a general sense of where they were all going, but that was it. And I ran into a lot of problems when you publish a book, when you write a book, then publish it, then write the next one and publish it. Those are all set in stone then, and you're kind of fucked for the next couple of ones. You know, when characters are in the wrong place, but it takes 10 weeks by ship to get there, and then you've only got 2 days and you've got to find out some magical way to get them there. And that very much stalled me. It increased the time that the book was with beta readers. It increased the time that I sat there just like tearing my hair out about all these plot problems. And so with Curse of the Cyren Queen, I found sort of an outline template that I thought suited how I wanted the book to be structured. And I used that. I outlined it chapter by chapter, scene by scene, quite granular. And then I'd have, when I like come to sit at my desk 7:30 in the morning, I have my outline on one screen and then my Word document on the other, and off I go. It sounds simple. It's probably not that streamlined, but
yeah,
that's the gist of it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and also it sounds simple, but I also know sort of the mental taxation as well of putting yourself into that routine and getting down and getting into the zone and all that kind of stuff. How long do you typically write for?
Outline is sorry. Yeah. How long do I typically write for? So this year, I've tried 30-minute sprints. They're usually quite good. It sort of ebbs and flows how I approach the sprints depending on where I'm at with the book and how annoyed I am at myself. But yeah, usually 30-minute sprints. Or if like a couple of weeks ago, I was at the end of a draft and I was like, I just have to get this done. It's doing my head in. The 30-minute sprints were annoying me. So I just sat and got it done. Yeah. I knew I wasn't being as productive. Like I was staring at the screen. I was like dicking around with other stuff, but that was the only way I could get it done. Yeah. So, yeah, it changes, but yeah, I've been doing sprints, like usually about 30 minutes. And when I'm really disciplined about it, 30 minutes, I force myself to get up, go make a tea, go breathe the air outside for 5 minutes and then come back. Because I find I could just sit at the computer, check an email, do this, that, but then I'm not refreshed when I come back to the next sprint. So that's the sort of strategy at the moment anyway.
Yeah. I like the fact as well that you mentioned exercise in the mornings as well, to kind of like refresh your mind and everything. Is that something that you work into your life every day, or is that kind of an ad hoc thing that you do when you feel like you require it?
I try every day. So I used to be really active when I was younger. I did soccer, I did ballet, I did like everything under the sun. And really, it's only been, so I moved to New Zealand about 3 years ago, and I haven't been as active here because sometimes the weather's horrendous, like it's snowing, it's cold. But it must have been about like 6 months ago or so, we got an exercise bike. And that literally gives me no excuse. Like I cannot not exercise, like the thing's right there. I can watch TV while I exercise, like, you know, so I try, like, and I don't do much, you know, like I'm not super fit. That's something I'd like to be, you know, delving into a bit next year, maybe exercising twice a day. Because you just feel so much better mentally. You feel better. And you know, there was a couple of months where I did it first thing in the morning, exercise, shower, sat down. I was like, wow, I've already achieved so much, and I haven't actually started work. Now I'm sort of doing it midday when I start to feel a bit sluggish, and I need, like, my brain needs a rest. So it just depends. I guess I think where I'm at with drafting, because at each stage of drafting, I'm very different, like mentally. But yeah, the exercise definitely helps. I'm not as good as I should be. I'm trying every day for 30 minutes. And I'm not like killing myself on the exercise bike. I'm watching like Friends or something, you know. I went through a stage where I was watching the 20 books to 50K conference videos. I was like, wow, I'm so productive.
Nice.
Yeah, but, you know, it's not, I'm not like doing CrossFit or anything, but you know, it's a start. So it's one of those things, I guess, that you've got to gradually introduce yourself. And that's why I'm doing the exercise bike and not on too hard a gear, because if I hate it, I'm not going to do it. So
yeah. And like you say, there's a resistance sometimes. If you've got the bike literally in a position in which you can just get to it, get on it, and you don't have to question it, as opposed to, say, if you're doing outdoor cycling and you have to like go and get the bike and then you have to go and do this, and like even though it doesn't feel that heavy, there can be resistance between such simple things, and you'll find excuses to just
absolutely
not do it.
Yeah. Like here where I live now is a very small town, and if I went out running, I would inevitably run into 10 people I know and think about what exercise gear I'm wearing, like have I showered today, do I need a shower, like, you know, all these extra things that really don't matter, but the stupid things that I worry about and then I'll use as an excuse not to go. So literally I can roll out of bed, chuck whatever I'm wearing on, and then just jump on the bike and either listen to podcasts and the 20 book stuff, or if I'm feeling like a big marshmallowy sort of day, I watch Friends or Modern Family or something just to switch off. But it makes such a difference when you do it, and you always feel so much better after you've done it. It just, sometimes it's that, fuck's sake, like another thing I've got to tick off my list. So I put on my to-do list bike and shower every day, just so I can tick them off.
I love that because what I find amazing about exercise is that everyone knows that even just a little bit of exercise is going to help you in the long run, and that it does clear your head. Like, the science that proves it gets all the good endorphins and things running around your body. But, and I try, and I'm not saying this like in any way to be derogatory, like I literally struggle with this myself. There are so many things that I know that I could do that are simple, that would make me feel better, would make my life easier, and you just don't do them. Like there's like a resistance to something where, like, you know, it will help you, but it's easier to do this other thing, even though it's going to make you feel like crap in the long run. Just an outside thought. How do you recharge? How do you sort of fill that creative well and give yourself that downtime between, you know, pummeling out books?
Yeah, that is something I struggle with massively. I'm not great at it. I'm much better at it now that I live in New Zealand, and I don't live alone, because when I lived in Oz, I had an apartment to myself. And if I didn't have like a social event on that night, you just have dinner and then you go back to the computer, or you pretend like you're chilling out watching TV, but you got your computer on your lap and you're answering emails and stuff. Whereas now, like my partner's quite good in that he's like, what are you still working for? What are you doing? Thought we were watching this, thought we were going this place, you know, or we'll make dinner together, and it just sort of like breaks up the day. And having that sort of accountability with someone that you've got to show up and be present with them, like ask them about their day and stuff, which I really enjoy. But when I lived alone, like, what was I going to do?
I will take a note now. Find a girlfriend. There we go.
So yeah, to be fair, he's a very special person, and he is very good in encouraging me to get outside, to you know, on the weekend, if I open the laptop, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just doing this thing. No, we're going here, we're doing this, we're having drinks, we're having cocktails. So he's very good at kind of pulling me out of that. But in terms of like refilling the creative well and stuff, that's something I'm trying to really do at the end of this year, because I feel like I haven't read as much as I wanted to read for pleasure. I haven't stayed in touch with friends back home as well as I should have, because I'm working, there's a time difference, like similar to the exercise stuff. There's always a barrier if you let there be a barrier. And so, yeah, I'm trying to be more sort of mindful about all that stuff. I definitely want to be able to read more, because, you know, I'll read a book and get like 10 more ideas, you know, for something else. So it does have this, like the creative well thing. And we live in such a beautiful place. Like, you've seen some of the photos
it's gorgeous.
of where we live. Yeah. So, you know, just going out on the weekend for a walk, or, you know, to a friend's house and looking out on people's balconies, and there's mountains and lakes and stuff everywhere.
Not jealous.
Yeah. Not jealous at all. You would love the hikes here. So we do some of the hikes and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely an area that I still need to actively work on, and I'm very aware of that.
Yeah. No, I do find that, because for people that don't know, I do live alone. I definitely struggle with that idea of like, well, what else is there to do in like an evening? You just crack on. And it was much easier having those boundaries when I was in a relationship. And even with the exercise, I used to set my alarm quite early. And then I would get up the minute my alarm went off because I didn't want to like disturb my ex too much. It was like, you couldn't just sit and snooze because then you're affecting someone else. So, you know, you get up and you just do. And it's a whole different beast. I'm still trying to like work on that now that because it's only recently been that I've moved back into living by myself. So I'm still trying to like get used to a lot of that stuff.
I mean, it's exciting though, living by yourself, and you get to structure your whole, I loved it too. And you structure your whole day how you want it, answer to no one, like, you know, it just does have like, I guess the downfalls of not having someone right there who you're accountable to. And that's it really.
Swings and roundabouts both ways. Like it's just what you have to try and get used to. I want to be respectful of your time. So I do have one more question before we round out this interview. And that question is, Helen Scheuerer, why do you write?
Oh, I think it's going to be the same as a lot of other people. It is very much sort of a compulsion for me. I can't imagine not doing it. When I'm not doing it, I'm thinking about, you know, story ideas and how to improve things. I think a lot of us writers, you just can't switch your brain off from it. It's not just a job, it's also kind of part of your personality. And so I'm just constantly thinking about it. And during times when I haven't had an ongoing project, I am frustrated and restless and irritated. And I think I just I just think I need that outlet, and you know, it's I can't really describe it more than that. It's a compulsion, it's a problem.
I love that. Where can people find out more about yourself and everything that you're working on?
You can find me at helenscheuerer.com. I'm sure you'll have to provide a link because my name's a little problematic. And yeah, most of my information is on there. You can download like free prequel novellas to my Curse of the Cyren Queen series there to check out the sort of style that I use. And I'm also pretty active on Instagram, and I give like a lot of sort of behind the scenes look at author life and, you know, works in progress. I'm a massive nerd for all that stuff. So yeah, probably Instagram and my website are the best places.
Perfect. And I will attest, check out her stuff. It is fantastic. I have read it, so it's Dan approved. And Helen, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's really fun talking about writing with you always.
No worries. And a massive thank you to you, the listeners, for tuning in. And as always, if you're looking to level up your writing and activate your author career, head on over to activatedauthors.com to find out all about our community, our resources, and everything that we do. And also, just an extra bonus we haven't actually touched on in this episode, you can find Helen hanging over there on our Slack group and join her alongside our other expert panelists every single month for our live member Q&As.
Activate your energy.